think one of the reasons we started was because of the pandemic. Or at least, that's what I tell myself for all the new shows and bad habits that were formed during the 2020 chaos. Okay, so Andrew and I watched a lot of television during the lockdown because that's one of the few things we could do. I know we watched the big things like everyone else. We watched Tiger King. We watched the Clone Wars. We watched The Last Dance. Love those Bulls. But when those ended, we needed new shows. That's when we started watching makeup competitions. It's not a secret that my wife does enjoy the makeups. The joy that these beauty enhancers bring her is real. Those containers filled with colorful dirt make her very happy. And they fill her with joy as she combines them in different ways to show her creativity. Because of her love for makeups and the boredom of 2020, it's not a surprise that we tried a few different makeup competition shows. The first was Glam Master. It was fine. Something to watch. Nothing great. Then we saw a British show called Glow Up, Britain's Next Makeup Star. Did that show frustrate Andrea? But brought us entertainment at the same time. This show, which had 2 seasons done, and I think a third one is still coming out, but I'm not sure about that, is one of those traditional reality shows with weekly episodic where they give a contest, and every episode they get a winner and a the loser goes home, all until they get down to one person and they get their shot at fame and fortune. Glow Up, though, is not just a normal reality show that lets men and women put on makeup. No. Its goal is to make makeup to a bold place in the fashion world. Each week has a theme and a challenge and follows a lot of the rules of traditional reality shows. But this one puts on emphasis on makeup artists and how they can transform their canvas. So when I watch it, there's a lot of times in these episodes where when I see the end results from the makeup artist, I think it's kind of odd, weird, maybe untraditional and difficult to wear. But then Andrea has reminded me probably around 20 times. This is not makeup you would wear every day. This is done for special occasions and events. It's about transforming the face of the person into something else through makeup. While some of the transformations were done well, and when I looked at the end results, I could see what they're going for. Like I remember the lady who transformed her palette into a Pikachu. That was fine. Creative. Then other ones, I'm sorry, are just weird. But even the weird ones still got transformed from a normal human face into something that only an artist can think of. Even a few got when they revealed their final results, got a ding dong yelled at them, which I'm not sure, but I'm thinking it's British slang for well done. At least that's what I hope it is. But transformations are fun to see. It could be in the format of makeup or a makeover. Or maybe through correction of a bad habit like in hoarding, or even slimming down in weight. While the process is not always easy, it's rarely easy actually, but it's worth it. Today we're going to be looking at transformations ourselves. So we're transforming from Vashti to Esther, and then Esther, the beautiful woman with the lovely figure, to heart-stopping beauty. And Esther, the maiden, to Esther, the queen. This is just a background noise, though, for what we need to see is the point that God is teaching us through this part of Scripture. Because today we're going to be learning about placing your trust in the right places. Placing your trust in the right places. I want to look back a little bit to see how Esther got a chance to become queen. Let's remind ourselves how Esther got culled by the officers of the king in Esther chapter 2, verses 7 and 8. He was bringing up Hadassah, that is Esther, the daughter of his uncle, for she had neither father nor mother. The young woman had a beautiful figure and was lovely to look at. And when her father and mother died, Mordecai took her as his own daughter. So when the king's order and his edict were proclaimed, and when many young women were gathered in Susa, in the citadel, in the custody of Haggai, Esther was also taken to the king's palace and put in the custody of Haggai, who was in charge of the women. So let's remember, there was an empire-wide search for all and any hot and single ladies in their area, like the ads tell us. This honor was given to those who were chosen, but came with a major downside, as in you had to leave your family. Being chosen by one of the king's stooges meant that you were placed in the harem of the king, in the town of Susa, under the watchful eye of Haggai. While this potential in this placement means that you might become queen, the downfall for most is that you get whisked away from your family in your teens, where then you will end up in a harem of the king, never to be married, never to have your own family, and then you die. For Esther, this time of her life was filled with new and unknown. But the need to place her trust in the right people is seen clearly. Because the person she has to trust is her father cousin, Mordecai. Look with me in chapter 2, verses 9, 10, and 11, please. Verse 9 reads, "And the young woman pleased him and won his favor. And he quickly provided her with cosmetics and her portion of food. And with 7 chosen young women from the king's palace, and advanced her and her young women to the best place in the harem. Esther had not made known her people or kindred, for Mordecai had commanded her not to make it known. And every day Mordecai walked in front of the courts of the harem to learn how Esther was and what was happening to her." So, since Esther was under the care of Haggai in the harem, Mordecai left her with some specific instructions, perhaps unusual instructions, too, when you look at verse 10. She was not to tell anyone about her family or her being Jewish. What's interesting to me is how this verse shows us that Esther was told by Mordecai not to relay this information about her background. Because in verse 10, the word command, or in Hebrew, savah, is used to show emphasis. But is this a request from Mordecai to Esther? Was it an order? Suggestion? The word savah is traditionally defined as give an order or command. But what makes it interesting in the ripple of the sentence is how it is used. As in, this word is not an imperative word, like imperative being like an order. As in, run, you fools. The verb is used as a PL verb, which is a type of verb in Hebrew. It's used to express an intensive type of action with an active voice. Let me give an example. The sentence, he broke the window, shows a basic active verb in the active present voice. But when you make it a PL verb, remember, it shows intensified action. The sentence changes then to, he shattered the window. So for Mordecai, this was not an imperative command, but a simple action that has been intensified. It could be then Mordecai requested Esther not do this and gave her an intensified order showing us how important this is. So it's not a command to Esther, but something that is very important. So with this knowledge, why was there such scrutiny on her Jewish background? And what would it take for Esther to keep the secret from so many ladies in his harem, plus so many of those who are charged for caring for these women in this harem? The reason to keep Esther's Jewish background hidden are easier to understand than how she kept that secret. According to historian Herodotus, King Xerxes should have looked for a queen among the nobility or maybe among the beautiful families of Persia. If that was the case, Esther, who is Jewish and not Persian by descent and is not nobility, had no chance of becoming queen if her nationality had been made known. But then there brings up the second question, and the more difficult one. How did she keep this secret for so long? How would it look like? The obvious areas to safeguard Esther are what she eats and who she hangs around with. Since verse 11 tells us that Mordecai came and checked on Esther through her keeper daily, it makes me wonder how people like Haggai or the other staff did not put two and two together to realize that Mordecai, the well-known Jewish figure in the town, very well-known, and family of Esther, did not realize that Esther might be the same as Mordecai. If any of the other ladies in this contest could do simple observations, they would have had the biggest leverage over Esther, who was a foreigner. But she trusted her cousin Mordecai. She kept the secret that he told her, that he put emphasis on her keeping, because she had great trust in this man. Esther kept her Jewish nationality a secret because she didn't tell Haggai. She didn't tell the maids. She didn't tell any of the other women in the harem because Mordecai told her not to. From this and the other statements in this book, it's clear that our author is pointing out the fact that God protected and used Esther and Mordecai, even though they were not living according to the law, by the commands of God and his people. Even though God used these two people to do great things, and we'll get to that, because he did use them to do great things in this country, Esther took the wisdom of someone she trusted, and it meant that she most likely had to be breaking the Jewish law and by eating what was given to her. While I'm willing to assume that these women were on a special diet and care program, which probably meant no triple cheeseburgers and dozen donuts for breakfast. After all, they had to get into the right body shape to please the king. It would then lead us to believe her that she didn't have an opportunity to follow Jewish dietary laws. Granted, this is just my speculation, because from what we see when we compare Esther to Daniel, who was in a similar situation in the foreign country and given foreign food, chose not to eat meat. It says nothing like that here. So, to me, it's a safe observation to assume that she ate whatever was put in front of her, whether it be part of the Jewish dietary law or not. She probably did eat her share of pork and shrimp. But Esther did all this. The breaking of the Jewish laws, the secrets, the double lives, because Mordecai told her so. And she trusted him. She trusted the advice that he gave. We need to have people in our life who are like that. Mordecai's for us. There are plenty of things, ideals, people, companies that we put our trust in. And you know what? They will disappoint us. But God never will. Our God is the constant in this dangerous and ever-changing world. We have a God who loves us, who knows us, who made us, who wants us to do well, to not fall into sin, to not place our faith and trust in something that is fake and temporary, but put our faith and trust in Him. Look at some of the verses that I pulled out from Scripture about what it says about how we can trust God. Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Do not lean on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge Him, and He will make your path straight. Classic. But look at Psalm 56. When I am afraid, I will put my trust in you. In God, whose word I praise, in God I trust. I shall not be afraid. What can flesh do to me? These two of many examples of how, from Scripture, of how we can put our trust in God, shows that our level of faith and trust in God needs to be at an Esther level, an absolute trust, even when we don't understand. Because we know that God does. For Esther, her trust in Mordecai is just as solid. But he's not the only person she will trust. Let's get into the other half of this chapter. Look at me with chapter 2, verses 12, 13, and 14. Now when he came for each young woman to go into King Ahasuerus after being 12 months under the regulations for women, since this was the regular period of their beautifying, 6 months with oil of myrrh, and 6 months with spices and ointments for women. When the young women went into the king in this way, she was given whatever she desired to take with her from the harem to the king's palace. In the evening she would go in, and in the morning she would return to the second harem in custody of Shazgaz, the king's eunuch, who was in charge of concubines. She would not go into the king again unless the king delighted in her and she was summoned by name. Okay, let's talk beauty again. Each of the ladies in his talent pool of beauty had one opportunity with the king, unless he requested them to come back by name. But before this dinner date with Xerxes, they had a long year of grueling and difficult beauty treatments. Each of these women endured 6 months of treatment with oil of myrrh, and then 6 months of treatment with spices and ointments. Why? So let's look at the first one, oil of myrrh. Myrrh is a gum from a small tree that gives a fragrant smell. It has a heavy history with beautiful smells, and a lot of recorded places in the Bible of it having sexual uses. Look at Proverbs 7:17 or Song of Solomon, chapter 1, verse 13. Since oil of myrrh is specifically mentioned, the myrrh seems to be used in this case to enhance the skin's appearance, kind of like how we would use creams to exfoliate our skin now. Okay, this first 6 months kind of makes sense to me. These girls were, at minimum, teenagers, just over the puberty line, and all of us know, in puberty, your body makes weird changes from acne to terrible skin. So if they are this young, then using these oils to help clear the skin, make them smell well naturally, it makes sense. Plus, historical studies of countries near Persia show that the skin treatments of that time period that women like Esther could have endured in this 6 month time period. They would apply a beautifying paste over several months, and it would be used to not only exfoliate the skin, but lighten the color of the skin and remove blemishes and spots. Kind of like removing, we put on a face mask now and help us clear up the pores of our skin. So I'm told. So this first 6 month period seems intense, but after looking at it, it could have been probably a lot shorter now with modern skincare techniques. Because I look at the counter of my bathroom with Andrea, and my Andrea has all her goos and gloops that she uses to beautify her skin, and they were designed to work well and fast. Persian beauty companies did not have these sciences or understand as much as we do now. But it was still effective, just longer, took a lot longer. But then there's a second 6-month period, which kind of sounds odd to me. Why do they need spices and anointing her if they just did 6 months with beautiful spelling myrrh? Well, some people think the spices were more of a hygienic and therapeutic process that involved the daily exposing the women to smoke of burning spices and having her clothing and skin absorbing the smell. Kind of like smoking a brisket. Sorry. Archaeologists have discovered many cosmetic burners that they believe that were used in this time period in this way. So I would think it would be like the example would be like when we go to a bonfire. We stand by the fire, and by being close to it, we absorb the smell of the smoke. And then next morning, when you re-smell your clothes, they are embedded with smoke aroma. That's just like here, only they did this for every day for 6 months. So let's recap. Esther and all these ladies endured a daily greasing and brining with myrrh to make their skin clear and lighter in tone. And then they were smoked with spices so their skin naturally smelled like, well, whatever the king wanted them to naturally smell like. Also, when they got a chance to Netflix and chill with the king, it would please him and hopefully help him remember their name so that they could become queen. But then before they left, they were allowed to take anything they want with them. Do you think any of these women in this nightly chain of sex brought in props, special flashy clothing, or maybe peacocked themselves so that they could be memorable to the king? Like, I don't know, did one of the girls try to bring in a magic set and did some close-up magic? Is this your card? Or wear a big, super big hat to bring attention to her? Esther could have done any of these things to be memorable. But instead, she had to place her trust in her handler, Haggai. Look with me in chapter 2, verses 15 through 19. When the turn came for Esther, the daughter of Abihail, the uncle of Mordecai, who was taken as her own daughter, to go in to the king, she asked for nothing except for what Haggai, the king's eunuch, who had charge of the women, advised. Now Esther was winning favor in the eyes of all who saw her. And Esther won, and when Esther was taken to King Ahasuerus into the royal palace in the 10th month, which is the month of Tebeth, in the 7th year of his reign. The king loved Esther more than any of the other women, and she won grace and favor in his sight more than any of the other virgins. So he set the royal crown on her head, made her queen instead of Vashti. Then the king gave a feast, a great feast, for all his officials and servants. It was Esther's feast. He also granted a remission of taxes to the providences and gave gifts with royal generosity. So this is what great trust is. Esther had one chance to make her sex time with the king memorable. Instead of striking on her own, trying things that she thought would be workful, using props, inventing background, whatever, she let Haggai guide her. This is a huge trust, because if he was wrong, Esther would have just been another woman who lost her virginity to the king, and then would have been stuck with the other deflowered concubines until she died. But because of her great trust that Esther had in Mordecai and Haggai for what to wear, what to say, how to act, and what to bring, it worked out splendidly. In verse 17, we see that when it's Esther's turn, things go perfectly for her. Because as it says in verse 17, the king loved Esther more than any of the other women. She won grace and favor in his sight more than the other virgins, and he set the royal crown on her head and made her queen instead of Vashti. So thanks to the verses in verse 16, we can see that it's been 4 years since the Vashti fiasco, and it's finally Esther's turn with the king. And like I said, it went very well. Because the words used to describe the night with Esther were the king loved Esther and she won grace and favor. Let's talk about loved first. This form of loved is in Hebrew is the word ahav. It's not the type of love we expect to we see in the New Testament, like agape love, a God type love, or phileo, a brotherly type love. No. This is more like the king liked Esther, or the king flirted with Esther. So we can say then that Esther was liked or preferred more than she was romantically loved. And then it says that she won grace and favor. Well, I would like to say this is the New Testament version of grace, an undeserved gift, but it's not. It's more of favor, popularity, loyalty to the king that Esther had. But out of this miraculous Cinderella moment for Esther, a new queen was chosen, and because they had a new queen, her, a new holiday. And let's be honest, who doesn't love a holiday? Verse 18. The king gave a great feast for all his officials and servants. It was Esther's feast. He also granted a remission of taxes to the provinces and gave gifts with royal generosity. So Esther become queen, has a dinner party because, of course, as Xerxes is going to throw a dinner party. It's what he does best. But as an added bonus, tax-free holiday for everybody in the empire. But there's also gifts. This is most likely not one of those corporate gifts that a lot of us get around Christmas time from the companies we work for. Because I have had enough of getting beer koozies and keychains from my time at Pizza Hut to last me for a lifetime. Because each one of them went into the garbage along with the corporate stamped Happy Holiday card right that night. And it's probably even better than free cafeteria personal pan pizza that Andrea got from her work as a thank you gift for being a frontline responder. As in, hey, thanks for being ankle deep in COVID virus and death every day. Here's one free bread sauce circle. Who doesn't love a free bread cheese sauce circle after dealing with a COVID lockdown for 4 months? Some people like to think that these gifts that the king brought on this federal holiday, the Esther holiday, would be royal food given to the commoners of that area as a thank you. So, the king could brought over maybe Wagyu steaks to the people when they're used to eating chicken nuggets and hot dogs. Royal food, commoner food. And then they got to taste what royalty tastes like. I don't know. But this search for a queen with result in Esther hoisting a crown meant that God had a lot of people in the right places at the right time. And for Esther, it meant having a great deal of trust for it to work. Esther is a great example for us in learning to trust the right people. Because without the help of Mordecai, in not broadcasting her background, that she's Jewish and a foreigner, it helped her a lot. The same can be said of Haggai and knowing how to act, what to bring, what to do when you're with the king. We need these kinds of people in our lives. The people we can trust and not only help us, but point us towards God. So that leaves me the question, who is highest on your list of people you can trust? Is the list filled with family, close friends? Or maybe doctors, celebrities, politicians, corporate industry? Which can you trust? And where's God on your list for people you can trust? How high? How low? We need to be able to trust God with all our lives, with all our everything. And that goes for the same people, for the people of the church, the believers in God, and the people we spend eternity with. We need to trust them too. See you next time.